There is a spare tire riding around in the trunk of your car right now, along with a jack and a wrench, and the only reason you have been hauling all of that everywhere you drive is that the four tires holding up your vehicle are basically tough rubber bags full of air, and one nail can empty one of them in about 30 seconds. Here is how expensive that design actually is. Roughly 1 in 5 tires on Earth gets thrown in the garbage before it has even worn out, with about 12% scrapped from flats and blowouts and another 8% destroyed by uneven wear from running at the wrong pressure. 1 in 5 worldwide wasted purely because of air. And that is just the tires themselves. It does not count the tow trucks, the missed flights, the delivery vans sitting dead on a shoulder while the clock runs, or the fleets that keep entire crews on staff for no other reason than that vehicles keep going flat. Now picture a tire you could drive a nail straight through and just keep going on, with no warning light and no pulling over and no kneeling in wet gravel on the shoulder of a highway. That tire already exists, and it has already been driven on an ordinary passenger car at 130 miles an hour, backed by more than 50 patents. So why is it still not on your car? That answer is genuinely surprising, because it has almost nothing to do with whether these tires work, and almost everything to do with a factory floor. And it is the reason Chinese manufacturers may end up deciding when you finally get them. Let's get into it. The tire that holds itself up. Picture a wheel with the side of the tire sliced away so you can look straight through it. In a normal tire, you would find an empty chamber full of squeezed air, because that air is the thing actually carrying your car, and the rubber around it is really just a very tough container keeping it trapped in place. That is the design the Michelin brothers came up with back in the 1890s, and it has barely changed since, because squeezed air is springy and light and cheap, and it smooths out a rough road better than almost anything anyone has put under a vehicle. Now look through an airless tire instead, and there is no chamber at all. What you see is a web of flexible spokes fanning out from the rim to the outer band, sometimes shaped like a honeycomb, and sometimes like a row of curved arches, each one molded from a springy engineered plastic or from rubber reinforced with strong fibers. Those spokes are the whole trick, because they do the exact job the air used to do. When your wheel rolls over a bump, the spokes at the bottom, the ones actually touching the road, flex and squash and swallow the hit, then snap back into shape as the wheel keeps turning. The weight rides on the structure itself instead of on trapped gas, and because that support is built into the material rather than sealed inside a chamber, there is simply nothing left that can leak or blow out. Put a nail through the tread, and all you have is a tire with a hole in it that keeps working exactly like it did the day before. And this is not one company's science project either, because almost every serious tire maker on Earth has been chasing the same idea from a different angle. Michelin's version for passenger cars pairs an aluminum wheel with rubber reinforced by strong fibers and carries roughly 50 patents worth of engineering behind it, and that is the one tested at 130 miles an hour. Hankook in Korea builds theirs around a double-arch structure designed to spread heavy loads evenly across the whole tire. NASA went further than anybody, developing a version for rovers on the moon, and Mars built around a remarkable metal that springs back to its original shape no matter how badly you bend it, because a flat tire on Mars is not a repairable situation. And here is the part that surprised me most while researching this. On some designs, the tread is a separate replaceable band, so when the rubber wears out, you swap just that surface and keep the entire structure underneath, the way you would resole a good pair of boots instead of throwing the whole shoe away. Michelin's own estimate is that killing off flats and pressure problems could stop as many as 200 million tires a year from being scrapped early, which is around 2 million tons of material, roughly the weight of 200 Eiffel Towers, staying out of landfills every single year. So this is not a rough prototype, it is a solved piece of engineering with enormous stakes attached to it, which makes the obvious question even louder, because if it works this well, somebody should already be selling it to you. And they tried. About 20 years ago, the car industry took a serious swing at killing the flat tire, spent a fortune on it, put it on hundreds of thousands of cars, and drivers hated it so much that many of them paid money to have it removed. The industry already tried this once. You have probably heard of run-flat tires, and if you drive a BMW or a Mercedes, there is a decent chance you are riding on them right now. The idea was clever enough on paper because instead of removing the air, they reinforced the sidewalls so heavily that the tire could hold up the car for another 30 to 50 miles even after losing all its pressure, which is enough to get you off the highway and to a shop instead of stranded on the shoulder. Car makers loved it because it meant they could delete the spare tire from the trunk entirely and free up all that space. And then drivers actually lived with them. Those thick, stiff sidewalls that hold the car up after a puncture are also thick, stiff sidewalls the rest of the time, so the ride got noticeably harsher over rough pavement. They cost anywhere from 35 to 200% more than a normal tire, with some running between $150 and $500 each. They tend to wear out sooner, in some cases up to 6,000 miles earlier. And here is the part that really soured people, because most run flats cannot be patched after a puncture at all, since driving on a deflated one damages the inside of the tire in ways that are hard to inspect, so a nail that would have cost you a $20 plug on a normal tire now costs you a whole new tire. The market reaction was brutal. Dealers report that swapping run flats out for conventional tires is one of the first things many owners do to a new car. When run flats were offered as an optional upgrade, uptake was described as negligible, meaning almost nobody chose them voluntarily, and they only ever got used when a manufacturer installed them as standard and gave buyers no say. Fleet operators warned they could push tire costs up by a quarter. Some car makers have been quietly backing away from them ever since. That failure matters here, and not because it makes airless tires look bad. It matters because it shows exactly what the market will and will not tolerate. Drivers proved they want the flat tire problem solved, but they will not accept a worse ride, a higher price, and a tire they cannot repair as the price of solving it. Run flats asked people to pay more for less. An airless tire that hits the right price does the opposite, and that is precisely why the cost question is the whole ballgame. If you are finding this as interesting as I did digging into it, a like genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. Because now we get to the part that actually decides this. And it is happening about 7,000 miles from Detroit. Why China decides when you get these? The thing that kills promising technology is almost never the science, it is the price. And this is exactly where China has rewritten the ending for one industry after another. Start with where the Chinese tire industry actually sits today, because it is nowhere near where most Americans assume. Salen just broke into the global top 10 tire brands for the first time ever, shoving out Japan's Toyo, with brand value climbing 13% to over $900 million. Linglong supplies factory tires to Volkswagen and General Motors and Ford. ZC Rubber runs at a scale that touches every continent on Earth. And across the board, Chinese tires now sell for roughly 15 to 25% less than European or American equivalents at similar performance, which stopped being a story about cheap knockoffs a long time ago and became a story about an entire supply chain sitting inside one country that can fill an order in 30 to 45 days. Now lay the airless tire on top of that, because here is why it suits Chinese manufacturing almost perfectly. A regular tire is an assembly built up from steel belts and fabric layers and several different rubber compounds stacked together and then cooked, which is a complicated process with a lot of steps and a lot of ways to get it wrong. Many airless designs are the complete opposite, because they are essentially molded, meaning you inject an engineered plastic into a mold, and what comes out the other side is a finished tire. Molding things at enormous volume for almost nothing while redesigning fast whenever something needs fixing is exactly what Chinese factories have spent 30 years becoming the best on the planet at. That is the same pattern that played out with solar panels, where the technology sat expensive and out of reach for decades until Chinese factories started building it at scale and the price collapsed through the floor, and it happened again with electric car batteries. The breakthrough usually happens somewhere else. The moment the thing finally gets cheap enough for ordinary people is very often the moment China starts building it. And here is the part most people miss entirely, because while everyone has been watching to see which company puts airless tires on a car first, China quietly skipped that race and went somewhere else. They are not politely waiting for the car market to open up. Chinese manufacturers are already turning out airless tires by the enormous batch for scooters and delivery carts and warehouse robots and forklifts and the little self-driving delivery vehicles rolling around Chinese cities. If you have ever ridden one of the shared bikes parked outside a subway station in Beijing or Shanghai, you have almost certainly ridden on airless tires without noticing, because that entire industry quietly switched years ago and simply stopped having flats. Chinese factories advertise honeycomb designs made from recyclable material that shrug off sunlight and acid rain and refuse to crack for 5 years in brutal conditions, and they will sell them to you 500 at a time. And there is a reason those vehicles went first that has nothing to do with technology. Think about what a flat tire actually costs a company running 100,000 rental bikes or a warehouse full of robots, because every vehicle sitting flat is earning nothing while somebody has to physically drive out, find it, and fix it. Multiply that across a fleet, and flats stop being an annoyance and turn into one of the biggest line items in the whole operation. Airless tires wipe out that entire category of cost overnight, which is why the switch happened fast and at enormous scale without most people outside China ever noticing it happened. Every one of those wheels is practice. Every batch makes the mold sharper and the material cheaper and the process faster. And all of that hard-won experience points straight at the biggest prize in the entire industry, which is the 4 tires sitting under your car. So the technology works, the manufacturing muscle is there, and the demand is obvious. Which brings us to the honest part, and the actual answer to the question I asked at the start of this video, because there are 3 specific problems standing between you and a tire that cannot go flat. And the third one is the one nobody sees coming. What's still standing in the way? The first problem is heat. A normal tire gets some cooling from the air inside it and from air moving through the wheel, but an airless tire is a dense structure that flexes constantly, and all that flexing generates heat with nowhere convenient to escape to. At forklift and scooter speeds, this matters not at all, which is exactly why those vehicles switched over years ago. At 75 miles an hour for 4 straight hours across Nevada, in August it becomes a serious engineering problem, and heat buildup is one of the main reasons these designs have struggled to make the leap from slow vehicles to highway vehicles. The second problem is weight. Swapping air for a physical structure means adding material, so airless tires tend to come out heavier than the ones they would replace, which hurts fuel economy. And on an electric vehicle where engineers scrap over every single pound to protect driving range, that is a genuine obstacle. And the third problem is the one almost nobody predicts, which is debris. All those open gaps between the spokes that make the tire work are also open gaps that pack solid with mud and snow and gravel and road salt, and a tire loaded unevenly with frozen slush is an unbalanced tire which you feel as a shake in the steering wheel at highway speed. Engineers are working on covers and shaped inserts to handle it, but it is an awkward problem precisely because that openness is the entire point of the design. Then there is the deeply unglamorous reality that a tire is a legally regulated safety part. So any new design has to prove itself through years of testing before anyone is allowed to sell it for road use, and that clock runs in years no matter how brilliant the product is. Michelin originally aimed to have its airless tire on sale by 2024, and it still has not landed as a normal product you can walk in and buy for your car, which tells you everything about how hard that final stretch really is. And to be fair to the companies grinding away at this, they are not being slow for no reason. Your tires are the only thing connecting a 2-ton vehicle carrying your family to the road, and they have to work in 100-degree heat and on sheet ice at 80 miles an hour after 5 years of being completely ignored with a pothole waiting around any corner. Getting genuinely confident about that takes a staggering amount of testing, and nobody wants to be the company that got it wrong. But notice what is missing from that list of problems, because not one of them is a question about whether the idea works. Heat is a materials problem, weight is a design problem, debris is a shape problem. Every single one of them is the kind of thing that gets solved by building a few million of something and watching what breaks, which is precisely the thing Chinese factories are already doing every single day on scooters and delivery carts while everyone else runs careful trials. The part worth remembering. So no, you cannot go buy flat-proof tires for your truck this weekend, and anyone promising them by next spring is guessing. But what is actually true here is far more interesting than the hype, because the technology works and it has already been proven at highway speed, and the questions still on the table are heat and weight and price rather than whether the whole idea holds together. And if the pattern holds, the road to your driveway almost certainly does not run through an expensive launch on a European luxury car. It runs through Chinese factories molding these things by the tens of millions for scooters and delivery fleets and warehouse vehicles until the process is dialed in and the cost has collapsed, and then climbing up into passenger cars from underneath. That is how solar panels got cheap, and that is how batteries got cheap, and there is no obvious reason tires would break the pattern. Here is the thing worth hanging on to. The tire on your car is a 130-year-old design whose greatest strength and its only real weakness happen to be the exact same thing, which is that it is held up by air. Take the air out and the flat tire stops existing as a concept, and that spare in your trunk becomes as strange a relic as a hand crank on the front of a car. The engineering to pull that off is essentially finished. What is left is the price, and the price gets decided in factories rather than laboratories. Let me know in the comments whether you would actually put airless tires on your own vehicle if they showed up tomorrow at the same price as regular ones, or whether 130 years of air is just too hard to give up, because I honestly go back and forth on it. And if this was worth your time, then subscribe and stick around. There is more like this coming.